Chapter 9 continued. The name meant nothing to the captain at the time, but that name was all he got. An hour later, he and the chamberlain stood before McCall.
Este,
McCall said.
That's what he said. Este, McCall said, is the name of the Songmaster of the High Room, his teacher in the Songhouse.
Oh.
These blocks you have so lovingly spent 4 days trying to break were placed there years ago by his teachers, not by kidnappers only the last few months. We had to be sure. Yes, McCall said, you had to be sure. And we're not sure now, of course. If the barriers were placed in his mind by his teacher, why can't he remember how he spent his days during his captivity? We can only conclude that some blocks come from the Songhouse and some blocks from his captors. But what can we do about it?
Send the boy back to the Songhouse, said the chamberlain. McCall's face was terrible. It was as if he wanted to shout, but dared not say what he would say if he surrendered himself to passion that much. So he did not shout, but after a moment of struggle said, Chamberlain, that's a suggestion I will not hear again. I know it may be necessary, but as for now, I will have my songbird with me. My lord, the captain said, you stayed alive all these years by not taking such chances. Until Ansett came, McCall answered painfully. I did not know what I was staying alive for. The captain bowed his head. The chamberlain thought of another argument, almost said something, and then thought better of it. Bring him to me, said McCall. In open court, so that everyone can watch me accept my songbird again. I'll have no taint on him. In 2 hours. They left, and McCall sat alone on the floor in front of his fireplace, resting his chin on his hands. He was getting old, and his back hurt, and he tried to hum a tune that the songbird had often sung. The voice was old and creaky, and he couldn't do it. The fire spat at him, and he wondered what it would be like to have beautiful Ansett hold a laser and aim it at his heart. He would not know what he was doing, McCall reminded himself. He would be innocent in his heart. But I would still be dead when he was through. Chapter 10. The captain and chamberlain came together to take Ansett from the cell where he had spent the last 4 days. He wants you to come. Ansett had control again. He showed little emotion as he asked, Am I ready? They said nothing for a moment, which was answer enough. Then I won't go, Ansett said. He commands it, the chamberlain said. Not if we don't know what's been hidden in my head. The captain patted Ansett's shoulder. A loyal attitude, but the only thing we could find was that at least some of the blocks were laid by your teacher. Este? Yes. Ansett smiled, and suddenly his voice radiated confidence. Then it's all right. She wishes nothing but good for McCall. Only some of the blocks. And the smile left Ansett's face. But she will come. He's expecting you in court in less than 2 hours. Can't we try again? Trying again would be pointless. Whoever laid the blocks in your mind laid them well, Ansett. And McCall won't be put off any longer. You have no choice. Please, come with us now. And the captain stood. He expected to be obeyed. And Ansett followed. They wound their way through the palace to the security rooms at the entrances to the court. There, Ansett insisted on their most thorough search, every possible poison and weapon checked for. And tie my hands, Ansett said. McCall wouldn't stand for it, the captain said, but the chamberlain nodded and said, The boy's right. So they clamped manacles onto Ansett's forearms. The manacles quickly fit snugly from elbow to wrist. They were held by metal bars exactly 20 centimeters apart behind his back, which was uncomfortable at first, and steadily more uncomfortable the longer he had to hold the position. They also hobbled his legs. And keep guards with lasers far enough from me that there's no chance of my taking a weapon. You know, said the captain, that we might still find your kidnappers. We've identified the accent now. Air. I've never heard of the planet, said the chamberlain. It's an island, here, on Earth. Another group of freedom fighters? Asked the chamberlain, scornfully. With more gall than most. An accent isn't much to go on, but we're going on it, the captain said, with finality. It's time, said a servant at the door. They left the security room and passed through the ordinary security system. Detectors that scanned for metals and the more ordinary poisons. Guards who frisked everyone, including Ansett, because they had been told to make no exceptions. And then Ansett passed between the doors and walked into the great hall. When the students had visited, most of the hall had been empty, their chairs gathered up near the throne. Now the full court was in session, with visitors from dozens of planets waiting along the edges of the room to present their petitions or make gifts, or to complain about some government policy or official. McCall sat on his throne at the end of the room. He needed nothing more than a simple, if elegant, chair. No raised platform, no steps, nothing but his own bearing and dignity to raise him above the level of everyone around him. Ansett had never approached the throne from this end of the room. He had always stood beside McCall, had always entered from the back, and now he knew why so many who walked up this long space were trembling when they reached the end. Every eye was upon him as he passed, and McCall watched him gravely from the throne. Ansett wanted to run to him, embrace him, sing songs, and find comfort in McCall's acceptance. Yet he knew that in his mind might hide instructions to kill the old man on the throne. He came within a dozen meters of the throne and knelt, bowing his head. McCall raised his hand in the ritual of recognition. Ansett had heard McCall laugh at the rituals when they were alone together, but now the majesty of set forms helped Ansett maintain his calm. "My lord," said Ansett, in clear, bell-like tones that filled the room and stopped all the whispered conversations around the walls. "I am Ansett, and I have come to ask for my life." In the old days, McCall had once explained to Ansett, this was the ritual for rulers of hundreds of worlds, and it had meant something. Many a rebel lord or soldier had died on the spot when the sovereign denied the petition, and even McCall took the pro forma surrender of life seriously. It was one of many constant reminders he used to help his subjects remember that he had power over them.
"Why should I spare you?"
McCall asked, his voice old but firm. To anyone else he would have seemed a model of poise, but Ansett knew the voice, and heard the quaver of eagerness, of fear and gentle trembling on the edges of the tones. The ritual required Ansett to simply state his accomplishments, something modest yet impressive, but Ansett left the ritual here and fervently sang to McCall, "Father McCall, you should not." The crowd around the walls began whispering again. The sight of the songbird in manacles and hobbled was shocking enough, but for the songbird to plead for his own death.
"Why not?"
McCall asked, seeming impassive, but Ansett knew that he was warning him, saying,
"Don't push. Don't force me."
"Because, my lord McCall Imperator, things were done to me that are now locked in my mind, so that neither I nor anyone can find them. I therefore have secrets from you. I'm a danger to you, Father McCall." Ansett deliberately broke with formality in his last sentence, and the threat in his voice struck fear in everyone in the room.
"None of that," McCall said. "You think you're acting for my good, but you don't know my good. Don't try to teach me to fear you, because I will not." He raised his hand. "I grant you your life."
And Ansett, despite the strain it caused on his bound arms, leaned down and kissed the floor to express his gratitude for McCall's clemency. It was a gesture that only pardoned traitors used.
"Why are you bound?"
asked McCall. "For your safety."
"Unbind him,"
McCall said. But Ansett noticed with relief that the captain of the guard disarmed the men who came out to untie the hobble and break open the manacles. When they were removed, Ansett stood. He raised his now free arms over his head, lifted his gaze to the great vaults of the ceiling, and sang his love for McCall. But the song was full of warning, though there were no direct words, and the song also sang of Ansett's regret that because of McCall's wisdom, and for the sake of the Empire, Ansett would now be sent away.
"No!"
cried McCall, interrupting the song.
"No! My son, Ansett, I won't send you away. I would rather meet death at your hands than receive gifts from any others. Your life is more valuable to me than my own."
And McCall reached out his arms. Ansett came to him and embraced him before the throne, and together they left the hall, with legend already growing behind them. In a week, all the Empire would know that McCall had called his songbird, "My son, Ansett." The embrace would be pictured in every newspaper. Storytellers would repeat over and over again the words, "Your life is more valuable to me than my own." Chapter 11. The door to McCall's private room closed, and Ansett stood only a few steps into the room. McCall was ahead of him, stopped, looking at nothing, his back to Ansett.
"Never again,"
McCall said. The voice was husky with emotion, and the back was bent. McCall turned around and faced Ansett, and it shocked the boy how old McCall's face had become. The creases were deeper, and the mouth turned more sharply down, and the eyes were deep with pain. They lay in the sunken sockets like jewels in dark velvet, and Ansett suddenly realized that Mikal might someday die.
Never again, Mikal said. This can never happen again. When you pleaded with me for freedom from guards and rules and schedules, I said, that's right, you can go. A songbird can't be caged. To me, to my friends, you are a beautiful melody in the air. To my enemies, who far outnumber my friends, you are a tool. The very taking of you might have killed me, Ansett. I'm not young. I can't take such things.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. How could you have known? Raised in that damnable songhouse with no exposure to life at all, how could you have known what kind of hate propels the animals who walk on two legs, claiming to be intelligent? I knew. But ever since you came, I've been a fool. I've lived for it feels like 1,000 years, 1,000,000 years, and never made so many mistakes as I have since you came.
Then send me away, please. Mikal looked at him closely.
Do you want to go?
Ansett wanted to lie to him, to say, yes, I must go, send me home to the songhouse. But he couldn't lie to Mikal. No, he finally said.
Then there we are. But from now on you'll be guarded. It's too damned late, but we'll watch you, and you'll let me and my men protect you.
Yes.
Sing to me, damn it, sing to me!
And Mikal strode across the floor, lifted the 11-year-old boy in his arms, carried him to the fire, and held him as Ansett began to sing. It was a soft song, and it was short, but at the end of it Mikal was lying on his back, looking at the ceiling. Tears streamed out of his eyes. I didn't mean the song to be sad. I was rejoicing, Ansett said.
So am I. Este, Mikal said, is the name of the Songmaster of the High Room, his teacher in the Songhouse.
Oh.
These blocks you have so lovingly spent 4 days trying to break were placed there years ago by his teachers, not by kidnappers only the last few months. We had to be sure. Yes, Mikal said, you had to be sure. And we're not sure now, of course. If the barriers were placed in his mind by his teacher, why can't he remember how he spent his days during his captivity? Accept my songbird again. I'll have no taint on him. In 2 hours.
They left, and Mikal sat alone on the floor in front of his fireplace, resting his chin on his hands. He was getting old, and his back hurt, and he tried to hum a tune that the songbird had often sung. The voice was old and creaky, and he couldn't do it. The fire spat at him, and he wondered what it would be like to have beautiful Ansett hold a laser and aim it at his heart. He would not know what he was doing. Chapter 9 continued. The name meant nothing to the captain at the time, but that name was all he got. An hour later, he and the chamberlain stood before Mikal.
Este,
Mikal said.
That's what he said. We can only conclude that some blocks come from the songhouse and some blocks from his captors. But what can we do about it?
Send the boy back to the songhouse, said the chamberlain. Mikal's face was terrible. It was as if he wanted to shout, but dared not say what he would say if he surrendered himself to passion that much. So he did not shout, but after a moment of struggle said, Chamberlain, that's a suggestion I will not hear again. I know it may be necessary, but as for now, I will have my songbird with me. My lord, the captain said, you stayed alive all these years by not taking such chances. Until Ansett came, Mikal answered painfully. I did not know what I was staying alive for. The captain bowed his head. The chamberlain thought of another argument, almost said something, and then thought better of it.
Bring him to me, said Mikal. In open court, so that everyone can watch me